Okay, we're up here at the dust chamber, and they've got a picture of it here. Let me kind of focus in for a moment. Hopefully you can see that. That's what it looked like before the wind got to it and the wall on this north side fell down. So what was, oh, by the way, I learned that they were using around 400,000 gallons of water per day at this location. That's a lot of water, folks. So the dust chamber, what's that used for? Well, behind me here is the smelter, and when you're smelting ore, it's putting off a whole lot of gases, and they are hot gases. So what you had to do is you had to condense, put all those gases in an area so that they would condense, and then the copper would solidify against like the walls of the walls of the chimney, okay? And I'm sure that they had baffles somewhere within this building so that those hot gases would leap and jump those baffles before it would go up and out the chimney, so that the copper would re-solidify against those baffles. And then periodically they could go in there, scrape that copper off, and then reintroduce it back into the smelter to get that copper. The other thing that the dust chamber was for is, like I said, those gases are really, really hot. So you could utilize that heat and use it to heat your rotary furnace. Think of it kind of like it's a big trommel, more or less, similar to like the trommels you see that they use when they're processing free gold or placer gold. Same principle. You're putting the ore inside of a trommel, only this trommel is heated. So imagine you got a big steel cylinder in here, okay? It's probably about 6, 8, or 10 feet in diameter, turning, and it's being heated by all of the hot gases that are coming from the smelter into this building. And when that crushed up ore is being heated and turned and flipped around like that, it's releasing all of those sulfides from the ore. And then once that's done, then that ore is introduced down to my right over here and into the smelter. So that's kind of cool. They were using one building for two things. Let's work our way up to, actually, let's get up here. There's where the chimney would have been, straight in front of me. Let's look back this direction. Okay, and there's where the air intakes were over there. So you got your hot gases coming in, going through this direction. Then I would imagine that somewhere in here was probably a series of baffles, or not. I'm just guessing at this point. And then after those gases cool down, they start to solidify in this area before it goes out the chimney. And here would be your chimney. Let's look around this side of it. Oh yeah, look at look what's stained all along the side of the rock here. See the green? Look at all that. That's what you get. That's copper. There's a nice view of it right there. It's too bad that wall fell over. That's why the BLM came out here and put a fence around this, because they knew that this wall wasn't structurally sound, and indeed it did collapse. All right. Oh, interesting. Hey, check this out, folks. See, I just glanced down and stuff just pops up. There's a brick with some writing on it. LAPE with 2 stars. The company that made the bricks. Okay. Slag pile. So when you're smelting raw ore right straight up from out of the mine and putting it into the smelting process, rather than introducing it first, which they should have done, and we'll visit that here in a moment. They should have put it through a gravity separation process. The problem with putting it right to the smelter right off the bat is you get a butt ton of slag, and not only that, you're using up a buttload of coca. And remember, all of that had to be trained in here, all that coke, and all of those little things are all nibbling away at your profit margin. That's why this place barely made any money until they installed this gravity separator. We'll get to that in a moment. But check this out. Look at these slag piles. There, you can see all the green in there. See it in the sun. Here's a piece. There we go. You look up on here, see it sparkling. Still a little bit. Oh, there's a nice piece down there. It's kind of sparkling. Here's one here. Let's show it to you. There you go. That is copper. Now, if we walk over here, I saw from old Bob. Wow. Well, these aren't even near the size of the slag piles in Pittsburgh. All right, let's look over here. Oh, holy cow, look at this one. There. Look at that shiny piece. Isn't that pretty? Okay, let's work our way up the slag pile. Crumbly stuff. This will give you an idea the size of the crucibles that they were firing the ore in. See that? And if you look down here on the ground, you can see how it was kind of semi-molten. It just poured down the side of the hill here kind of like lava. See that? There, gives you a good idea the size of the crucible. Let's look over here. Now, some are going to ask out there, is there copper in that? Yeah, a little bit, but no, that's all slag. And it's laying here on top of the slag pile. This is like one of the last things that they did. They let the slag solidify in the crucible, and before hauling the crucibles off, they knocked them out, and these big slag ingots poured out. That's why they're sitting on top. Probably one of the last things they did out here. There you go. There's a good viewpoint of the slag pile. All right, next stop, gravity separation. Meet you over there. All right, here we are at the gravity separator, and this is what I think is like the most interesting part of today's adventure. And why is that? Because this gravity separator represents a turning point in this mine location. Now, like I said earlier, the Clara Gold and Copper Mine Company owned all of this, and it was ran by that fella by the name of George Mitchell. And George had complete oversight of the millions of dollars that were being poured into this location from all of the investors. Now, old George, he was a spendy kind of fella, and he put a ton of money into the smelter, into the power plant, and all of the infrastructure of this location, when what he really should have done firsthand is built a gravity separator. Because what that does is you can separate out your copper before ever even introducing it into your smelter, and that's a much more efficient way of getting copper out of ore. Okay, so because he decided to do that, they were in trouble. By 1911, they were in big financial trouble, and the Clara Copper and Gold Company went out of business. And then a few years later, a company by the name of the American Smelting and Refining Company came out here at around 1914, and they said, no, we're not going to do it his way, we're going to do it our way, and they put in this gravity separator. So when you're running crushed ore down a gravity sep, what you're going to end up with is a whole bunch of float or a whole bunch of fines. Take a look here. Now remember earlier when I was showing you that galena in its natural form in that rock up here? All right, well, here's what it looks like after it gets done being processed through a concentrator. See that? Okay, and there's piles of it, heaps of it down here in this wash. There's many, many, many ton of that laying down in the wash. So if anybody wants to come out here and start a lead mine, hey, there's tons of it laying around. Let's take a look at this thing. Pretty interesting. Look at all the pylons. Of course, you know, gravity separation is going to be in a stair-step configuration. And it utilized a lot of water. So I can imagine up here we're going to see some sumps because they put the concentrates across tables that used a lot of water. You're going to get a lot of splash, so you're going to have probably some sort of a collection point where it can be recirculated back into the system. And oh, indeed, here we are. There's a sump. See all the galena on the ground here? It is sparkling everywhere. Here we go. Here's where the coarser materials would be introduced into the separation process. All right, we'll work over here too. Everybody wants to see the old foundations. There's even there's a funnel down in there, probably used to funnel the water off somewhere. So I'm pretty knowledgeable, but I'm not knowledgeable enough to tell you exactly what went where. Only historical pictures. Taking a look at those, we could figure that out. But pretty cool, nevertheless. Yeah, I wish I knew what everything was and where everything went. So we're just walking. I'm going to stay above it here to give you a good look at it all. Then after this, we're going to work our way down to where they loaded the trains and down by the train depot. Interesting. We have what looks like there's a big water tank right here. And what's over here? Just lots and lots of foundations for all different things. If I was omnipotent, I could tell you exactly what went right there and what it did and what it was, but I can't do that for you folks, as I'm not the curator of this site. I wish I was. I could tell you a whole lot more, but I think I'm doing a pretty good job, so hey. All right, well, there you go. Let's work our way to the train depot. That'd be kind of interesting. I'll meet you over there. So after you got done with your smelting of the ore, I mean, what does it say there? 1910. So after you smelted your ore into copper matte, not Matt the person, copper matte, M-A-T-T-E, then you had to haul it off. So where did it go? Well, believe it or not, most all of this ore ended up going to Swanessa, that's in the United Kingdom, in South Wales. So from here, it was put aboard this train. The train, you can see what's left of the tracks right here. You can kind of make it out, and it goes off that way. There's a scale right up there. We're going to go check that out here in a moment. They'd put it across the scale, weighed out each car, and then from here it would head out to Parker, Arizona, and then link up and be put on barges, which would then be float down the Colorado River, out down through California, and then put on ships and sailed off to the United Kingdom. And of course, you had to have a place where the men worked loading the trains, and this is what it was. What do we got up here? Looks like people collecting trinkets, little things they found along the way. There's the old stovepipe. And I saw pictures of this, these areas here. This was done by the BLM. This here, and where it's been scratched, that's all BLM restoration. They also put up these braces. You notice there's no more wood, all that's gone. Oh, check this out. After the BLM got done restoring it, they put their hand in there. A couple of handprints. All right, let's work around this way. Yeah, I've seen pictures of this in magazines. It looked a lot better than it does right now. These braces weren't here. Well, you know, these adobe structures, they don't last forever. They deteriorate pretty quick, especially when you don't have a roof over the top of them to keep the rain out of the walls. Okay, let's work our way down this way. We'll check out these handprints here. So those aren't from the period. That was done by the people restoring this building. Not too much to see, but interesting nevertheless. Okay, so let's work our way down over to the scales. Now I know I'm kind of looking into the sun here, but if you look off in the distance, you can see a giant pile of those fines or float that came off that gravity concentrator. We may have to go over there and take a look at that real quick. But in the meantime, here we are over here at the scale. According to the sign, built in 1910. Yeah, I'm cheating, folks. That didn't come out of my brain. So yeah, you know, they had to scale the ore cars. They knew how much ore was headed out of here. They knew how much the ore car weighed. So when they would scale it out, the difference was the amount of copper on each car. And over here, I've found a lot of these scales in my lifetime. And I often wondered, why was there always a sump next to it, just like you see right here? And I learned years later what this is this is where the counterweight sat next to the scale. Because if you're weighing an ore car that weighs many tons, you're going to need a behemoth of an offset to scale that car out, and this is where it sat, and then it kind of teeter-tottered between the two. They also had an additional set of weights that they could move across the what's that called, a pitman arm? I think it's called a pitman arm. Anyways, and that's so that they could fine-tune it to get a weight that's within tens of pounds. Okay, pretty interesting. I'm also noticing there's some people's names scratched into the concrete down there. I see something that looks like maybe like Prescott. Another person is a Joe. I can't read the rest of it, but we'll take a look from this angle. It makes you wonder how many hundreds of tons of ore were shipped out of here if that furnace could process 700 tons a day. All right, so we started the show off where I was showing you the galena, lead sulfide, silver sulfide in its natural form. Well, here's what you get when you run it across gravity separation. All that stuff floats right off the top. That's why they called it float or fines. And it had to go somewhere. Here's where it ended up, in a big giant pit. Let's work our way down there. I'll give you a closer look at it. Wow. I can't even imagine the amount of lead in all of this. You certainly don't want to breathe in the dust, but it's all kind of hard packed on here, like it's kind of like concrete, but you can still chip it. See, let me show you. It's not, it's still kind of powdery, but it can chip up. Look at all of this. Wow. Nothing's going to grow here in a million years. And everybody dumped their junk down here. This was the community junk pile. Look at the can. Look at the can dumps. Holy cow. Look up there. Thousands of cans. Look over there across the way. Another big can dump. That's pretty cool. I've never seen a pile of galena dust this big in all of my life. You know, with all these cans here, that gives me an idea. I'll be right back. So now in a lot of my videos, you have heard me say in the past, take a look at the can dumps surrounding a mining area, because that'll give you an indication as to how old the area is that you're exploring. Okay, so I just discovered this big can dump, and I'm sure that anybody that's ever walked around the western United States, you've seen these before. Rusted cans scattered out in the desert. Okay, all right, well, the quickest way to age these cans is when you first look at them, look at the seam, okay, or how these cans were made. All right, you're not seeing any solder. There's no solder on the seam that was folded over, crimped. Okay, that tells me that these cans were made by the American Can Company, and that came into be right around between 1900 and 1901. Prior to the American Can Company, cans were soldered along the seam using a mechanical process. Now, a soldered can, and you can tell when you see the bead of solder, it's going to look really nice. Okay, there's going to be a real nice bead along the seam. Soldered cans came to be between about 1880 to 1900, kind of in that area. All right, Now, if you get into some really old workings or a really old area and you see soldered cans that looks like where the solder was applied to the can in globs, all right, well, that's hand soldered. Now, those cans are really old. You're talking from about like the 1850s to the 1880s, kind of in that area is when things were hand soldered. Now, going back even further than that, now we're talking about cans pre-Civil War. There really wasn't cans, okay? Back then it was more mason jars and jugs and things of that nature back in the early 1800s. Okay, so the first thing to look at is look at the seam. All right, the next thing that you want to look for is, or actually I should say, the next thing you're going to ask yourself are, what are all these cans? What did they put in these? Okay, well, let's go over here because I lined up a few for you folks, and I'm going to tell you what they were. It's real simple. Okay. Okay, let's kind of start and go from large to small. Well, what were the large cans? That's pretty easy. Everybody's seen a can like this before. Okay, that's a coffee can. Yeah, that held ground coffee. Learn how to talk today. All right, the next kind of can, this size here. Typically, it's about 4 inches in diameter, 5-inch tall. That kind of can held canned fruit and vegetables. Figure potatoes, tomatoes, large, bulky fruit and vegetable items. That's why the can was this size, all right? Potted meat. Low profile cans like this contained different types of potted meat, like ham or beef, okay? Sometimes, like this one here would hold a can of ham. And you can always tell which ones are the potted meat because of their low profile. Then you're going to see cans like this that are about 2.5 inches in diameter, 5 to 6 inches tall, and they've been opened with a church key. That's going to be beer, or it could be juice. Okay, doesn't necessarily always have to be beer, but generally the people always opened up these types of can with a church key. You know, this one here, I'm surprised that it was only opened up on one side. Usually they open one here and then they crack it over here on another side to let the air in, so it makes it easier to drink. And finally, you have these kinds of cans. You'll see them laying on the ground, and notice it's not open on the bottom, it's not open on the top, but they always have 2 holes plugged in. What are those? Well, that's condensed milk. You know what condensed milk is. Carnation milk, okay? They use carnation milk in all kinds of stuff, from cooking or putting it in your coffee. Condensed milk was really popular back in the day. And everybody knows the old song of Carnation Milk, don't you? Well, if you don't know it, I'm going to sing it to you. Carnation milk, the best in the land. It comes to you in a red and white can. No tits to pinch, no chips to pitch. Just pop 2 holes in the son of a bitch. That's all I've got to say about that. Okay, well, if you can remember, we started today's adventure out where I said, let's just kind of explore this location as if we are a miner ourselves and work our way all the way through the process. Well, what better way to end the day with at the cemetery? Because that is kind of where we all end up anyways, isn't it? So here we are, Boot Hill. No, it probably wasn't called that, but that's what a lot of cemeteries were called. And let's see what we got here. Now, I read in some literature that there were bodies exhumed, and here we've got a grave right here. Okay. Relatives came out here, probably, you know, they exhumed the bodies and then took their remains to be closer home, you know. So these kind of places, it's hard to walk around in these kind of locations. It is hollowed ground, and you never know where you're stepping because there's no more markers. See, here's one here that was probably exhumed. There's another one. And because there's no markers, me personally, I always feel as though there's a tantamount of desecration to a grave when you walk over the top of somebody. So I'm going to try not to do that. You got to be respectful, you know what I mean? Yeah, I'm seeing let's look back this way, you can get a little bit better. See, here's a series of holes. There's one here. Another one. Another one. Another one. Another one. Another one. Wow. And one more there. Okay. Should we let's work our way maybe on the other side of it. Not seeing any headstones at all. Looks like we may have had one here. And all right, well, I wonder if they exhumed all the bodies. Exhumed, I should say. That's how you pronounce it. Now here we go. Here's a marker. Hey, somebody made that in the form of a cross. See that? This one looks a lot like the one I saw in the picture where they were explaining about exhuming the bodies. All right, well, that pretty much ends today's adventure. I thank you all for coming along. That was kind of fun, getting to know Swanessa, Arizona. The town that was discovered in the late 1860s, developed 1908, and then eventually went bust 1937. And shortly thereafter, they hauled off all the lumber and everything else they could scrap out of here to make money off of, and to this day it remains a ghost town. So I appreciate you all coming out with me for this adventure, and I especially appreciate all of my subscribers. Thank you so much for tuning in each and every weekend to watch my silly shows. And so share this with all your friends, kind of get it out there. I think there's a lot of people out there in the world that would enjoy these kinds of adventures. And if you want to help promote the channel and put a few bucks in old Bob's gas tank, I've got a website where I'm selling some pretty cool coffee mugs over there. They're not too expensive. Head on over there, get yourself a coffee mug. So, all right, we're going to get out of here. Thank you so much for coming along. We'll see you next weekend. Take care now.